guys, well, it hasn't been, more than a 1,000 or 2,000 miles, and I gotta pull the turbo. Let me pull the turbo and tell you guys exactly why we have to pull it. So I already disconnected everything, unmounted it. It's pretty easy to remove this setup with it being a front mounted kit. So let's go ahead and try to remove it. There it is. There it is. Let's talk about this thing a little bit here, guys. Intake is clean, no contamination. Charge pipe is clean, no oil leaking through the compressor. Very good. Let's close that off because it's raining. The reason we're taking off this turbo right now, and we're going to be looking into it here, is because I've been having a leak. I've been having a leak right over here. You can even see it a little bit wet right there on the center cartridge by the turbine side. So it's leaking and dripping, and it drips and drips, and it drips on this flange over here. It also drips right over here on this exhaust, and it smells. I'm not really losing a lot of oil or anything of that nature. It's just small drips, but I've already resealed. I put some copper gasket maker on the drain flange, and don't worry, there's nothing obstructing the copper seal on the drain. I made sure it doesn't flow where it's draining. And yeah, I just kind of want to figure it out. I took this turbo apart before I put in the new turbine seal, and I was hoping that new turbine seal would fix the leaking. I've been experimenting with where is it? I've been experimenting putting a clear drain hose on the car and checking how well it's draining, looking for excessive back pressure or crankcase pressure going up the turbo to possibly causing it to leak. I mean, I got the turbo clocked almost like a 12 o'clock position from the top, maybe a couple degrees off, but I'm running a 3/4 of an inch drain, which is plenty. We did determine that my drain bung is a hair lower than I would like it to be. It is what it is. Unless I put a new oil pan in, I can't fix that problem. But I've experimented with the car lifted and seeing how the fluid is draining. I've even squeezed this drain, like literally I was trying to back up the oil flow, and I squeezed this drain, and even with it squeezed, it wasn't really backing up to the point where that oil would be going in the turbo and overflowing to the turbine. So I'm gonna take the center cartridge off. We'll probably take the turbo apart, and we'll see what we can do. I already have a few ideas, and once we have it apart, I'm gonna tell you a little story how I messed up rebuilding this turbo the first time around. I did a little boo-boo, and I kind of messed it up, but we'll see. see, it's all wet over here. A lot of contamination here on the turbo as well, on the blade. Oh yeah, definitely smells like oil. Look at this seal right over here, definitely leaking. The compressor side looks great, doesn't look like there's any issues, but yeah, this drain I think has been a problem even on my version 1 build. You guys see that oil? It's kind of all over the housing, and I think that's why I'm having smoking issues. It's just right over here by the seal. Doesn't look like the downpipe has any oil in there, but again, it's draining, and you can see this fitting, this bung fitting, O2 fitting I have here, it's wet. So let's see what we can do here. So it turns out that this bolt goes all the way through, as you can see. This bolt goes all the way through, as you can see, and the same thing with this one. This is the only one that doesn't go through into the turbine. So now at least we know when we install these bolts over here back into the turbo, I'm gonna throw on some RTV, some copper gasket maker or something along those lines in there, so even if it does leak in the turbo a little bit, it'll get burned off, but it won't be leaking through my cartridge and dripping down here. So that's a good thing. I'm gonna take the turbo apart again, so I'm gonna dissect it, take the blades out, and inspect it further. You can see all that oil accumulating here and caking on. Turbo blade, bone dry. I'm looking at the blades. The blades look perfect. They don't look like they're scored or anything, so this is very good condition. But yeah, going across to the turbine, I mean, you got oil all over, top, bottom. Every single piece is wet here, and you got your turbo seal here that I replaced. It just came off. Let me try to take this piece off. One thing that I'm kind of seeing is some imprintation right over here on that turbine wheel. I don't know if it's hitting, but yeah, you can see that there's some cake on here, like it's definitely caking on as it's leaking. And this is my new turbo seal that I put on, unless this is too big of a seal. That's always a possibility too. Maybe it's the wrong seal. I got it from a T25, T28 rebuild kit. But I'm gonna look into this, clean this up. One thing that I was thinking about doing is, once I clean this up fully, putting in a little bit of copper gasket sealer right here, so when I put it in here, at least it won't leak through the cartridge. It'll just kind of stay in this housing and burn up, hopefully from the heat, and then eventually lead to a better seal. But yeah, there's definitely some caking going on over here. So I'm gonna look into it, do some research, and hopefully we can solve this turbo leaking problem. And turbos always have problems. Some people say, yeah, eBay turbo, sometimes they replace it once a year with a different turbo, but I don't want it to be the case. And I think these generic turbos are good as long as you have everything else which is good, like again, the turbo drain and feed positioned, you know, 12 o'clock and opposite here, As long as you have those, I think you're solid. You have an appropriate size drain. You have things that you are doing to eliminate crankcase pressure. I think you're fine. I mean, the bearing surface that the bearings ride on look pretty good. I mean, you do see some color discoloration on the turbine because of all the heat, but there's really not much scoring or anything of that nature. And just looking at the bearings also, I mean, they look pretty good. So all right, I'll get back to you guys soon. I think it's loading. Software is loading right now. Oh, there we go. You see it? So I'm capping off the feed, sticking this in the drain. Well, it's not the best example, but because it's actually coming out from here too. You see that? But there's your leak right there. You see how it's coming out from the piston seal? Somewhere right there has a small leak. Because now if I'm holding this, it's not coming out from the compressor. Let me see how. It dents. Kind of windy, eh? But it seems not terrible. Can't even see it, right?
I don't know. I'm conducting my own smoke test.
Yeah. It's definitely coming out from the turbine seal just a little bit. But to some extent, that might be quite normal. So I got the factory seal now in the turbine that came with the turbo, and we just put it on, and we kind of want to see how it's gonna seal. And yeah, you can clearly see the factory one is way worse than the one I had in there. Way more gases are escaping this one. So that's no good. Well, it's a valid test at least. All right, so we're putting high temp gasket maker right over here. We're gonna put it on with the center cartridge here, just so whatever leaks isn't gonna leak past this. Right over there. And then a very untraditional method, but both turbine piston seals had a little bit of leak. So we're actually, if you can see, we're actually putting in some RTV right by that piston, and we're gonna squeeze it into the center cartridge with the RTV. I know, call me ghetto, talk shit in the comments, but at this point it's an experiment because everything else seems legit. So you want the piston ring gap at the highest point by the feed. That way, if the oil level accumulates, it's not going to really leak until it gets towards the feed. So right over here is the top. Just try to wiggle it in. Boom, it's in, and that's it. We let it cure and dry. Hopefully there won't be a restriction on the spinning, which there already is, but that's gonna wear itself in. All right, GoPro, stop recording. So I got the turbine in with the gasket sealer. I put the gasket sealer on all the bolts now, and I'm gonna start reinstalling the compressor right after I clean it. We'll let it dry out and then we'll see how it goes. I think there definitely will be some success by sealing in that back plate. I think at least if it's gonna leak, it should leak through the turbo and into the exhaust. At least it won't be leaking out and going on the downpipe. So yeah, we'll give it some time. I'll get back to you guys later, and then hopefully get back to you with the results, see if this helps. So I finished putting the turbo back together the other day, and this is how it looks. As you can see, we got a lot of gasket maker there, and I know what you guys are probably thinking. Me putting in that gasket maker on the actual shaft is no good, and you might be right. But I'm hoping, I mean, the turbo spins just fine, maybe some resistance, but as soon as we start it up, let all the gasket maker kind of burn off, settle into those crevices, I'm hoping it's gonna work out or make something better. Worst case scenario, that sealer starts breaking off, clogging pores, going through the engine, blow up another engine. That's the worst case scenario. But is it likely gonna happen? It's not really likely gonna happen. This turbo, again, eBay turbo, and that's just something you're gonna have to deal with, I guess, with these cheaper turbos. These new modern turbos that are done by name brand companies, I would assume that the clearances and all the specifications are a little better, whereas these basic turbos on eBay, you know, your GT3582s, your eBay 6360s, all that stuff, the T3 T4s, it's such a basic turbo. It will work. I mean, granted, this will work just fine. This, even though it was smoking, it's still spooling up good, no problems at all. But do you want to deal with that smoke under wide open throttle or cruising? As you guys seen in those videos, how much it was smoking, super annoying. Like, again, two things we tried to accomplish here. One thing is by putting in that gasket maker here. One thing we wanted to accomplish, we didn't want that oil to be leaking on the exhaust, so that sealer might actually help here. But with the turbine piston ring seal, I'm hoping what we do is, if it is still gonna leak, I want it to leak in the exhaust and just burn off. That's it. That's my expectation. Can't expect too much more. And yeah, I know this is not the best thing to do, and the real way to fix it is, one, I can buy another center cartridge from eBay, throw it in, see what happens, or I can get like a name brand Garrett T25 series. But do I want to spend money on a automatic R18 for just a turbo kit? Not really. I mean, this suits me quite well, and I'm sure a lot of you guys that are budget oriented, you're doing just fine with the eBay stuff. It's just these little nuances that you got to work up, these kinks. And yeah, I'll still rock a eBay turbo, whatever. I don't care about the smoke now. At least now I know that it's smoking from there. Like, I solidly know that's what's smoking. I know the oil's not backing up because we ran experiments on that. We know it's just backing up through that little piston ring seal that has a clearance, and still crankcase pressure pushing oil out there that's coming in through the feed that's in the center cartridge, and it's just expanding in past to the exhaust side. So I'm gonna throw it on the car again. Kind of rainy day, but I just got back home from work, so I'm gonna throw it in, cycle it a couple times with the engine on and off, heat it up, cool it down, heat it up, cool it down, and if everything looks good, I'm just probably gonna reinstall the full exhaust and we're good. One thing we also did while we had this off, I actually, so let me tell you, after driving a few weeks, I actually noticed when I went to grab the wastegate flange that it was super loose. So the bolts unthreaded themselves, and one of the bolts I had was a smaller bolt, and I actually tapped a hole in the compressor housing, and then I didn't do a great tap job, and it wasn't really holding that bracket. So sometimes it almost was like the bracket was holding only on 1.5 bolts in a way, but now I tapped in a bigger bolt, put a gasket or a washer there, so this thing ain't going nowhere. Super solid. I won't have to worry about that anymore because it kind of makes the boost fluctuate a little bit. All right, this is all good. Smoke. I'm gonna let this puppy really warm up and give it a few revs and just see if any oil accumulates. If it doesn't accumulate, we're off to a good start, and then we're gonna start driving it, getting into boost, seeing if boost pressure is affected at all or not. All right guys, well that is a wrap. Everything seems good so far. We put the oil drain line on, we put the S pipe from that car, and I can tell you right now, much quieter around the S pipe area. I had that exhaust leak that was so annoying. I just have the tiniest exhaust leak from the turbo downpipe to that factory S pipe, just the tiniest one, but you could barely hear it. So I'm crossing my fingers that one, if it's burning in here, and hopefully it's not gonna burn, but stay tuned for the update, guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and follow me on Instagram. And man, I haven't been promoting my merch a lot or wearing it, but Big Cartel Bully Kid, check it out, link in the description below. Pick up some merch, get the prescription for the boost. Peace. I ain't here for the money.